It's Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs. Let's start the show with Lewis Tennant. Here we go. The guests and interviews that you're looking for with creators, innovators, and so much more. For all episodes and further info, verbalhighs.com is the place to go.
All right, hello everybody. Hello. Welcome to Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs, a podcast podcasted from a kitchen bench in Kingsland, in Auckland, in New Zealand. My name is Lewis and I'm the host of the show. And it's been a minute. It's been a minute, innit, since we last spoke, or I last spoke, and you ideally and hopefully listened. If you're new, hi. But it's been a while. September 11th, I noticed, was the last time I posted an episode in this labour of love that podcasts from the bench in the spare moments. And I've talked before about the reason why the episodes have become less frequent. It's generally a matter of guest fluffing in the metaphorical sense, you know, lining up people to come on in. It's not turning the mics on and chatting. I don't even really edit them. Most of them actually have zero editing. So it's not like there's a lot of posts. There's not a lot of work at the end. It's getting people to come on in. And so as a result, I've got to say I value all 65 people who have given up their time so far. Today, number 65 being Hugh Sundae, someone whose sort of trajectory shares a lot of parallels with mine, though in different cities. He, at a very young age, got involved with student radio, check. Ended up doing one of their main shows, very young, check. And so as a result, it was quite fun talking to someone else. It was just a couple of moments, and you'll hear it in our reactions to each other, where we just talk about little, I guess, perfunctory day-to-day elements of doing that stuff, or just sort of, certain kinds of understanding and that where I can't speak for Hugh, but it felt like for me, it was just nice to sort of joke about things like being good times. I couldn't do it now. Best of times, worst of times. Great experience. But yeah, Hugh. As he says, a different style of broadcaster to sort of other people who've done that slot on the B, like Mikey, and it came through in the podcast. He has a very understated yet very engaged manner, I found when I listened back to this episode. And I thought he and I had quite a nice dynamic in general. It's got nice feels, this podcast. It doesn't sort of go bombastic anywhere or too sort of crazy on the topic front, but it's an enjoyable listen if I don't say so myself. Okay, so I was going to talk about numbers of episodes. This time last year I'd done 41. Who's counting? But I said I'd set out to do 50. Those of you who listen know I set out to do 26 this year. I always remember at high school when I first got taught about manipulation of numbers and statistics. Well, you can do that mentally. I'm like, 26 this year. Taking my time, I'll get there. But the reality, folks, is I've done 14, and it's going to be November soon, and I've done 41 of the 50, and I've done let that sink in, I've done 14 of the 26. So on top of a whole lot of winding up the work here I've got at the moment, as well as some summer work I've agreed to take on, it's actually happening starting in the next couple of weeks, I'm going back into madcap podcast factory mode, like I did at the end of last year to get to 50. So I'm going to do it, folks. By December 31, however I do it, I will have for you the last, actually today's another one, so it's actually 15 so far. So I'll have you the last 11 by then, I promise. Promise. Now, what else? I normally have a day-to-day anecdote. Just before I wrote down the structure I've had of these intros that I've never really thought about. They're quite similar to this date. I was going to have one about scooters, about the scooter madness, the scooter scandal, the scooter polarisation that's happening in Auckland at the moment. But I think I'll leave that for the next ep. So, by the way, folks, more maths. Next ep's going to have to happen about every 6 or 7 days. So if you like what I do, it's probably good news for you. I think we should just leave it there and let Hugh chat. Thanks to Hallertau Beer, Dave, I'd like some more Hallertau beer, please, if you happen to catch this. They actually supported our Southern Hemisphere pinball champs last weekend as well, which was very fun. I placed quite well in one of the main comps, and then in the 3-strike comp, I got the bowling equivalent of a turkey, though in this case, it was a bad turkey, not an elation turkey. Like the show, Verbal Highs Podcast on Facebook. You can find me Verbal Highs on the Twitter. iTunes, you can like and subscribe, or you can rate and subscribe. Shout out to the person who gave me 1 star. And you can leave a comment there as well. There's actually really, I joke about the 1 star thing. Well, I don't joke about it. It's there. Shouldn't look at things that way. There's actually a good number of really nice comments there. And overall, if I was an Uber driver with my star rating, you'd be catching me in a minute, I'll tell you that. All right, this is Hugh Sundae. Nice to meet you, Hugh.
This is Dr. Tannen's Verbal Highs.
I opted, because I just wanted... I don't know, again, whether this is a silly idea, but I wanted it to be a standalone thing and kind of not on SoundCloud or da-da-da-da-da. So I go through Squarespace, who advertise through a bunch of... Do you listen to many podcasts, like overseas ones and stuff?
Yeah, like Radiolab and NPR and Infinite Monkey Cage and a few BBC ones. I listen to a lot of science ones, actually.
Yeah. Podcasts are educating our populace better than generations of high school teachers have, eh?
Well, it's funny that they... Like, I remember doing a story for TVNZ about 2002 about what a podcast was.
Yeah.
And it's like, hang on, it's the radio program. It's like they're saying like it was this new sort of thing. It's like, well, it's not really. People have been doing edited together radio features on radio for decades. It was just the delivery of it which was
different,
slightly different. In fact, that I guess there wasn't that many radio stations putting the audio up online at the time, but it was so funny now. It's like, well, there were plenty of radio features around before. Why don't you?
Well, you know what's funny about that is I hears you. I teach this stuff literally at AUT now.
Oh, really?
And it's allowed me, even though, to be honest, I think, late teens, early 20s, people like Rogan are cutting through, but I wouldn't exactly say they're listening to radio dramas and stuff, but it's allowed me to like bring the radio drama kind of back in as something that's understood and relevant now. There were a few years now where it was like, oh, this is this thing that was kind of, really big in New Zealand in the 40s, and people would be like, Yeah. So, yeah, it's come full circle. So back to where it's hosted, a lot of podcasts, somewhat ironically, advertise Squarespace, but a lot of them, some of the bigger ones, but a lot of them neglect to mention that Squarespace actually isn't that great for hosting audio.
Right.
But now I'm there, I'm just staying. So, hey, we're podcasting now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That old trick. I've used it many times.
It's not a trick, Hugh. It's a relaxant and an entry point. My guest today is Hugh Sundae, New Zealand broadcaster and journalist. New Zealand slipped in there because it came off your wiki page. He's best...
I didn't write that.
Right, well, you're not supposed to. They get taken down.
I don't even know how to create an account and go in and fix things. Like, I look at it and my eyes glaze over.
I think it's great. I mean, I think a wiki page is a nice little... what's the word?
Resource.
Acknowledgement.
It's definitely handy. Absolutely. I just, you see the odd thing every once in a while. Actually, I think it was about 3 years ago where someone said, oh, you've got a Wikipedia page, and I went and had a look, and there are a couple of minor things, but I thought, oh, is it easy to fix that? Nah, I didn't want to create an account and all that. So
well, you'd hate to be exposed as contributing to your own.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's best known for his various stints at BFM, including managing the place fairly recently, which we'll no doubt discuss, and doing breakfast and drive shows from a screamingly young age, younger in fact than when I started doing similar shows on Active. I'm working on TV projects including Close Up Tonight 2020, Music Nation, and Ice As, a little-known spin-off of Ice TV, as well as Intrepid Journeys, went to Mongolia, and the smash hit What's Wrong with Huntley. Welcome.
Thank you.
So the first thing I learnt today going in for Google search pages deep Was that you're not actually Hugh Sundae by birth? I don't know if that's a
No.
awfully well-known thing. It's part of your BFM heritage, is they actually renamed you.
Yeah, it was Graham Hill who did it. He, at the time, I was in my early teens, and when I don't even know how old Graham would have been at the time, but he was program director, and I'd been there for I don't know, half a dozen times, and he got my name wrong, and I kind of shyly attempted to correct him, and he was, have you met Graham?
No.
He's like, very braced. Yeah. Well, Ian. I like Hugh. Can I call you Hugh? I'm going to call you Hugh. And I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever you say. And so that's when Ian became Hugh, and then it was just a nickname for years, and then the Sundae sort of came at some point. I mean, Hugh Hughes kind of sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, and if you are going to be known as Hugh, you've got to, and people will refer to some kind of surname at some point, so I needed to kind of invent one. And so we just came up with the most ridiculous thing we could.
And it was originally Ian Hughes, and I think Hugh Sundae says media and entertainment. Like Ian Hughes, is Test cricketer, perhaps.
Yeah. And there actually is an actor called Ian Hughes, the local one, who we were often mistaken for, not like out in person, but we both did voiceover work and other bits and pieces, and sometimes I would get an email that was clearly for him, and there was one occasion where I turned up for a voice job, and it was, doing voice jobs with a bunch of strange agency people is kind of disconcerting at the best of times, but I could tell that there was some strange vibe there, and the guys were kind of looking at each other, and they're getting me to kind of do it again and again and again, and I could tell that when they sort of said, okay, great, thanks very much, that they weren't entirely happy with the read.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until later when my agent called me up and said, oh, yeah, there was a mix-up. They thought the other Ian Hughes was coming.
So the other Ian Hughes is in the voice racket too?
In fact, he owned it. He actually, I think I'm remembering this correctly, I think him and his wife bought it off, bought a company, a voiceover company off an old colleague of mine at BFM. She was a sales rep, and then she started a voiceover agency.
Big Mouth or something.
It was, yeah. And then they bought it off her. I don't know what happened to it now, but he does lots of he did then do lots of voiceovers. But what I always found crazy about that was that it's so New Zealand.
Yeah,
those guys were there clearly in this uncomfortable situation.
It didn't say anything.
And they didn't have the balls to kind of go, oh, sorry, there's been a mistake. Like, I had to actually leave thinking that I'd done the job.
And they paid 2 invoices in the process where they only had to pay 1.
Yeah, well.
Gee, so Graham was really supportive of you in those early years, getting you on air and so on.
Graham was, he was my first mentor, really.
I was going to say, you're protege of him, and I just find it sort of really funny that at the same time he did one of the most dismissive and rude things innocently, which is just completely not knowing your name.
Yeah, but that was an environment where there were dozens. I mean, more so than over recent years. The place was just full of volunteers all the time, and people were coming and going, and you weren't quite sure if they were volunteers or just people who were coming and hanging out on the couch for a while. And so, and also when I'd been coming in. Previous to that, that was the first time I'd gone in during the day. Yeah. Like I'd been volunteering at night time and going and answering calls and talk back with Timothy Giles. And so, even though I'd been involved with this place for a couple of months, maybe a few months, I hadn't really plucked up the courage to go in during the day.
Yeah.
So it's not entirely his fault. But he was super supportive. But in a cruel to be kind way, in a way that in a way that people kind of are a little bit dismissive of these days, which I think is a shame. Not cruel actually.
I know when you put it in the context of how people's interaction attitudes have changed. I get exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, like
the old school mentor.
Yeah, like here it is. Here's a form. Go and fill this out. Go and do this hard task to prove yourself. Yeah. Whereas now they'd be like, oh, yeah, I emailed him, but I couldn't get a phone number, so I stopped.
Yeah.
Whereas then it was like, go and do it and come back. And so I did it. He sent me this task. He gave me this form to fill out. You had to list all these songs that you would play if you were going to have a show. And
with that awkward, 15-year-old taste. Which
The Smiths. And then, and he asked me to record a demo, which people don't do enough. And there was some rudimentary technical equipment at my high school. A couple of tape decks and that kind of stuff. So I did a fake show for half an hour and gave it to him, and he was, suitably impressed and started giving me some fill-in slots on Graveyards.
And how was it that your folks were, like, you started going, I started really going up to Active probably 16 or 17, but you were 14. I mean, that's, how'd you convince the folks to let you go up to this?
Well, at the first time I went up, I know the first time I went up, it wasn't purposefully to go to BFM. I happened to be
around campus
on a Sunday night.
Yeah,
which sounds dodgy, but
which is a perfectly 14-year-old thing on your own to be doing.
No, yeah. I mean the details are not important, but there was a function that was arranged by a friend's family that was happening at the hotel down the road, which is now the Pullman. Back in those days, it was
those details actually really aren't important.
Yeah. I've got a habit of over-explaining. So there was a function down there that I happened to be at, and when that function finished, I remembered that it was Sunday night and that BFM was somewhere over in that direction, and so I wanted, and that Timothy Giles would be doing his show at the time, who was a really well-known personality amongst high school kids.
Right.
There was a big audience of people who would listen to Timothy Giles on Sunday nights, but who wouldn't necessarily be into BFM.
What was he doing? Talkback?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
think it's weird. Another guest told me the same about Bomber Bradbury doing that on Channel Z in Wellington for a period there.
It's funny. That would be after,
like, inspiring high school kids. That was who listened. Yeah.
I think Bomber would have known of Timothy Giles back in the day. In fact, when I was young at B, Bomber was the editor of Crackham for at least a year.
Right.
And the Crackham office was immediately next door to BFM. In fact, it's actually, the room it was in is part of BFM now, but at the time it was immediately next door. So he'd often come in and promote himself as a radio host, and would want, kept telling me that we should be doing a talkback show together.
Yeah.
And we just kept saying no. And then he went to Channel Z.
Right.
I think.
There you go. That's the story. And Tim Batt came in, comedian and writer, and said, when he was at Onslow, that the Bomber Sunday night, I believe, talkback show on Channel Z
right.
is what the kids were listening to. So you went on up, did you? So this kid appears at the door at B on a Sunday night. And what did he say? Come on in, see how the magic happens.
Yeah, well, it wasn't him. He was on air, but
he
he had two producers, slash kind of helpers who would answer the phones for him, and they answered the door when I rang it. And I just said, hey, I'm a big fan of the radio and I want to help. And they said, okay, come in here and answer the phone. So I went and took me into Studio 3 and explained how it worked, which was very simple. There were about 3 or 4 lines that you would answer. You would ask them what they wanted to talk about. You would write their name and then, a very, very brief summary of the subject, 1 or 2 words.
Yeah.
And then stick it on the Studio 3 window so that Timothy could see who to go to next.
That's so cool.
And that was it.
I really like that story because just the fact that someone was like, yeah, okay, jump in.
Yeah.
Because I remember even stuff like, I don't know, for me, is preaching to the choir here, but down at Active, very similar organisations, it was just being around the sort of people you met and stuff as well, and wanting to be on air. It was just the sort of world of kind of creativity and making stuff and talking to the public. I mean, I was happy there stuffing subcard mailer into envelopes just to do something with them, bit of pizza at the end.
You just want to be part of it. Same thing at B. The worst job was always, they would print out this, the process of a CD arriving at the station was that it would be taken out of its quite thick case and put into a slimline case. Yeah. Because, obviously there's thousands there. We've got to make the space work. Yeah. And then you would take out all the paper, the booklet and everything. You would cut out the most important bits of information and basically make the CD as unattractive as possible for stealing. Yeah. You'd write fuck and don't steal me on the CD itself. Yeah. But then you would have to you'd have to print out the spines. So it would be an A4 thing with one of those old Mac, first generation Mac computers.
The ones that student radio end up owning for 5 years longer than everywhere else.
Yeah, at least. And, and then you would have to get a pair of scissors and cut these impossibly thin strips of thing, and then sellotape them onto the spines of these CDs. And that was that was the worst job, but
with all these
would happily do it.
Impossibly interesting older people coming and going as you do it.
That's it. That's what it was. It was just it was a device to be there in the situation and not look uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because you had something to take your attention.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, all these really interesting people are coming and going.
Yeah.
And you're just absorbing the atmosphere. You're absorbing the opinions and the history and everything.
Yeah. I'll get back to that later when we talk about when you came on back after you've been overseas and so on. But in these early days, I think you ended up filling in on breakfast at 17. 17?
Yeah,
young.
Yeah, because So 17 was the beginning of seventh form.
I was going to say, that's right. So in seventh form, you think about being 17 now. You feel quite grown up at the time. You obviously pulled it off and you did well. But it's like, what does a 17-year-old talk about on air? Doing breakfast. It's big shoes to fill, man.
That's what the concern was. I mean, not everyone was happy about it, and there was.
I'm not saying it like I'm more meaning like. Do you ever look back and go, "Goodness"?
Oh no! I mean,
17.
Well, no. I mean, my point is, it was a valid concern. People would say, you've got no life experience and all that. So my way to counter that was fill up the show with stuff.
Yeah.
And Graham was always the best at that. It wasn't just interviews and features and giveaways. There were all, he was just so good at creating things. So if he'd see something on TV, he would record the audio of it and get the best bits and then play those as devices to get him into a discussion about something.
Yeah.
Or, taking a microphone to an event the night before and asking some slightly obnoxious questions of people and cutting it into a little 3-minute feature. So it was kind of like I didn't feel that I was particularly good at being funny off the cuff, like a Mikey or a Marcus or whatever. So for me it was all in the preparation. It was just making sure that I'd read as much and found as much as I could to fill the time to make up for my lack of life experience.
And also thinking pre-internet reading and finding as much as you can.
Yeah, totally. There was the internet. I mean, it was around and the station had it, but it wasn't as easy as it is now.
Yeah. It certainly wasn't. I'd probably rely more on stuff coming through on the fax machine a lot of the time back then.
And asking people. Good old-fashioned picking up the phone and doing pre-interviews with people, calling them up saying, hey, I'm going to be asking you about this. And, you'd actually do the interview twice. You kind of do one off air with them, make sure you got your facts right, and then kind of do it again on air.
What I find funny now, it's outside of radio, just mentioning, like, I notice people now almost are fearful of answering telephone calls. Like, I sometimes get into, like, an 8th email exchange deep, and I go, fuck, can we just pick up the phone and actually, we can sort this out and hear the intonation in each other's voices? And, I'm not one of those, back in the day, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, the telephone callers are dying. The telephone at my work just sits on my desk these days. It just doesn't do anything.
And particularly in a medium like radio, where things have got to happen fast. It's like, I get quite frustrated more recently where you would ask someone to do something and they would think that chasing someone down was sending an email off into the ether and waiting if anything came back. It's like, no, we've got a show on.
Right.
Pick up the phone and get them on the phone,
And connected people will get back, but a lot of people have whether it's official or not, they've got a 24-hour turnover, whether it's a rule or not, on each reply. Yeah. So there you are on Thursday when you wanted something to happen on Monday's show. Yeah,
it is, and the counter. I remember seeing a counter to that recently somewhere on social media, and someone was saying, the way these old people want, they insist on things being on the phone rather than email, so there's no paper trail of the, it's like that's a really misrepresentation of the situation. It's like no, just get them on the phone. So
my buddy Felix has some app on his phone where he records all his calls. Now, I actually, I'm in the mid-world now because I have, as I say, some friends and acquaintances and work-related people where it feels like they don't like calls. I just generally text people first now and say, hey, bro, are you up for a call in 5 minutes?
Yeah, if you're prepared for a call, it's no problem.
Yeah, meet mid-ground. And then your school, it's a great tale of people. I love stories where people around are accommodating and see what's going on. Like, I read somewhere that your school, like, arranged for you to come in at 11 a.m. once you... I mean, that's great.
It was, I was quite... it was a condition of doing it, so I had to put a good case forward.
Yeah.
And... because, Graham and Harriet, who was the station manager at the time, had taken me out and said, look, Graham's going away for 6 weeks and, we want you to fill in. And I was super excited, nervous about telling Mum, because I was like, am I going to get away with this?
Yeah.
But that was the deal, like if the school were okay with it, then we could make it happen. And I spoke to the deputy principal and just sort of explained the situation. And she recognised that it was a good opportunity, and so that was the deal. As long as I made up the work in my own time, and I could get to school by 11 o'clock, then it was okay. And the first day I did it, and I quit school.
I was just going to say, my punchline at the end was, it sort of backfired from their perspective. So you've never finished 7th form?
No.
Amazing.
No.
And in a world these days where there's a proliferation of training institutions for anything you can put your finger on. You can come out of a 3-year broadcasting degree or whatever. Someone wants to get you on brekkie that young. I mean, that's a unicorn these days. That's such a great opportunity.
Well, yeah. I mean, I if I'm ever writing out my CV, there is no education section because I don't have any qualifications at all. But I've got a lot of experience and thankfully, I guess the timing was right, in those days. It was okay, that was... I'd had enough experience that I overcame the lack of qualifications that these days might have made it more difficult for someone in the same position.
And then I think you went into a quite a long period of doing different television shows, right?
Yeah.
How did the move into TV happen?
When Timothy... Actually, it's even weird calling him Timothy. Timothy Giles was how he was known. I think Tim is what you actually called him.
Is he still around?
He is still around, actually.
Yeah.
I hadn't spoken to him in a long time, but then when we started doing bombathons in recent years and other fundraising stuff, he kind of made himself known to me and... gave me the odd phone call, bits of advice here and there.
Before you go on with Tim and TV, before I forget, speaking of the people we've been speaking of, Graham's show on Radio Live in the weekends is great.
Yeah, well, it's exactly Graham.
It's proper radio, mate.
Yeah.
Totally. Anyway, so Tim, as we now know him, and TV, Tim and TV.
So he'd left doing Talkback at some point, and it was taken over by I can't really remember. Like there was Nick and Steve who were almost as young as I was. In fact, maybe even younger.
Is that Nick D?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that earlier today. It must have been you and him, like, duking it out as the young kids up at B.
It kind of wasn't really like that. Because there was him and Steve. Like, Steve, they were...
I didn't really think that.
They were like a duo, almost. And I think they did talk back at some point in time. Campbell, Roy the lawyer, who was... Campbell Smith now, but Roy the lawyer at the time. He did talk back for a while, and he did it with Teresa Healy, who at the time was a big actress on Shorten Street.
Yes.
And then her friend, someone else's friend was Justin Pemberton, who was a director he was a director. He was a TV director who was working for Maxwell Film and Television, which was Karen Hay and Richard Driver's TV production company. Yeah. And they were pitching for they had funding for a music show. And they were looking for presenters. Well, they were looking for a presenter, I should say. And in those days, BFM was a place that TV people went to look for talent because radio people can talk and fill silence, and that's a good skill for people on TV to have. And so I just heard about the auditions via them and went for it. And that's when I got a call from Karen Hay. She was like, we really like you, but we also really like this other woman as well, so we're going to split the job into two, and she's going to do the anchoring and the studio stuff, and we'd like you to do the field stories.
And the other woman went on to become quite famous, right?
Yeah, Beck Runga.
Yeah. Did you spot her as a huge talent?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, musically, absolutely. She was... I don't know how long I'd known her for when she kind of brought out the demo tape.
Yeah, right.
But it was, And,
I do a little bit of singing and guitar playing as well.
And but it was, because normally you fear that when someone brings a tape out. But it was, so I really just watched her career just take off from that first moving up from Christchurch, and it was exciting to watch.
When I moved back to New Zealand, late 2000s, being like 2007 or whatever, I had a flat with one other person, which is always a bit odd if the vibe isn't quite right, because it's like there's two of you, but it's not a couple or a brother or whatever. And he told me he produced music before he moved in, and it was just like... I listened to it so many times in so many different states of mind in different locations, and it was terrible. No. And it was really, really awkward because we were both kind of quote-unquote music people. So I'm glad that tape had some some nuggets on it.
Yeah, I mean, if it had sucked, I mean, we wouldn't live together or anything like that. But I mean, she's amazing.
Absolutely. So that was turn of the millennium, 2000, and then... this is part of when I'm away from New Zealand, so I learnt only recently that there was a weird kind of reboot of Ice TV in a late night slot. It went from afternoons to...
Well, kind of. What had happened was, I think the show had been going for 6 years, and it was into its 7th year, and TV3 were looking to change it a bit. I think... I mean, I could be, inventing these memories myself, but I feel like, and I'm not sure, I'd have to look at a Wikipedia page to know if the dates match up, but I feel like shows like MTV, what Paul Castley and Mikey were doing on MTV, probably not eating media lunch yet, but those kinds of shows that were the antithesis of Ice TV, being this nice threesome on a couch, were...
A nice threesome on a couch.
Were turning heads. And I don't know if that was related to it or what, but the producer...
TV in New Zealand shook off a lot of conservatism around that time. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that feels fair to say.
Yeah. Not that show was... I hear what you're saying exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it didn't feel conservative probably to the mainstream, but to people who had come from a student radio background, it didn't feel, it didn't feel like that. So they replaced the producer on that season, and I don't know if I'm pretty sure Nathan just left, Nathan Rarari.
Yeah, I think he was really, like things like Channel Z, he was just really busy at the time. He had a lot of stuff going on,
So he would have left of his own accord. The producer was... I don't think the producer left off her own accord. I'm pretty sure she was just not hired back.
Yeah.
And
I think that's Jude.
Jude Unruh. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Who I was friends with at the time, so that was awkward. And so, the new producer came in, and I had known her through Paul Castley, and so she got me in to replace Nathan.
So it was you and Petra?
Me and Petra and John.
And John.
Yeah, but it was still the same show. Like, it was... They just changed the name slightly, but it was effectively...
They changed the time slot, though. It went from afternoon to nights, didn't it?
I don't think it was... I'm pretty sure it was nights with those guys. Certainly towards the end of the later years of it, I'm pretty sure it was...
There's a weird post-modern moment where I discount the person who actually lived it and say, no, it was on the internet. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it may have gone up.
No,
later,
I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you. It was on when it was on.
Yeah. So that was an odd year. It was good fun. Live TV is a lot of fun, but it was we were not a natural threesome.
Yeah, and they'd probably had their groove on for so long. It'd be very hard, sort of difficult for everyone. And then, sorry, no,
I was just reminded of what made it even weirder was that one of the elements that they'd brought into that season was this. They had this idea to have a drama that was going through, like an episodic drama that was going through every week.
Like not even a drama with a hint of this is ridiculous, an actual drama.
An actual like a 5-minute drama.
That's so weird.
That was written by Tor Fraser.
Right.
So I had some real writing chops.
Yeah.
But it was written, but it was like this real meta kind of thing where it was sort of behind the scenes of Ice As. I can't even. I think it was called The Ice House.
Without a hint of humour or.
Oh no! I mean that's not. No, I mean it was trying to be a bit funny and stuff, but it was a deadpan. It was these. And it was, all that drama I was talking about how Nathan had gone and I was there and we all kind of got on well enough, but maybe not as good as we could have, and all this sort of weird tension and the...
But then also with what sounds like the producers kind of throwing things and seeing what'll stick.
Yeah. And so there was this kind of quite awkward scripted thing where we had to act that we were all quite uncomfortable, which we were, so... Yeah, bizarre.
And then you went and co-hosted with someone else who's in a different field, got a fairly household name for herself in New Zealand. You did music TV with Jackie Brown.
Jackie Brown, yeah. Again, I replaced someone because they left.
Yeah.
Dom, whatever his name is, Dominic.
Not Dom Harvey, who does The Edge now.
Oh,
Dom
God,
someone.
no.
God, no.
What's his name? Dom, what's his name?
Dom.
Household name.
Dom household name? Okay.
Whatever his name was. He left, and so I went to space and co-hosted with her for what I think was all... Oh, we may have had 2 seasons of that. Maybe it was just 1 season, I can't remember.
Was that music videos and banter?
Very similar to Ice TV.
To Ice TV.
Yeah. Live, I think it was a little bit longer. It was an hour and a half, not an hour. Live bands would play, and there'd be 2 or 3 guests, and there'd be field items and.
Oh, okay, so it wasn't like the music video show like you did with Beck. It was more of a.
No. It was an actual. It was
cool.
Effectively a.
This is, as I say, this is anything between 2000 to about 2007 or 8. Just all new to me.
That's right.
And then you end up bearing in mind for, I don't know what listeners' references are to student radio, to Auckland through different periods and so on, but the late 90s, it's fair to say, B and its audience were kind of as big as the mainstream in a lot of ways. And so you come back on to Breakfast in 2002, and I'd imagine there was still... B had a big share of people, right? And quite a big set of shoes to fill, as it always is when Mikey leaves. So how was that?
It was.
I'm assuming Mikey had left at 2002 at that stage when you came in. Yeah,
because I'd hoped to get the show when he had got it after Graham had left, properly.
Yep.
But I just had to kind of wait another cycle.
Yep.
And he left, and I got it, and it was great. I mean, I just loved it. Again, I was doing what I was saying before, just trying to fill it with stuff. I didn't have any, family responsibilities. You got
more life experiences. You've had, you've had, as you say, middling threesomes on couches and.
I really hope someone doesn't tune in and just hear that bit and not hear the
not hear the
context
17,
of that.
You haven't even had a good or a bad one,
And it was great. Like we would just spend all day doing stuff for the next day's show. We'd just listen to music, find great songs, and go and interview people, or take a recorder out and make a feature. And I just sort of lived and breathed it for about 2.5 years, and then gave it away again.
That's a great luxury. Like when the on air part is it's 1% of the time pie of actually spending a working week on what that show has in it.
Oh yeah, I mean it really is the only way to do it. Like if you're doing it properly,
I'm not sure based on other hosts.
Oh no, I mean it's
I'm right there with you. Yeah.
Like if you're going to do it, like if you've got this slot that a lot of other people would kill for.
Yeah,
you've got to got to do the best you can, you know. And it, you know, the days were different, you know. It was, you know, Auckland was still an expensive place to live in, but you didn't necessarily, you know, I managed to kind of get by on the mediocre pay that it was, and you know, put the odd voice job here and there. But I think later, towards the end of it, I was kind of doubling up with, you know, TV stuff here and there, but I definitely felt like I had enough time to put the work in.
Yeah, because when I hear that, because when I did it, I was going to let that one go. I thought of it, but now it's come up. Yeah, when I my stint on Bricky in Wellington, I think it was 97 to sort of late 99, so a bit earlier. It was 100. I think initially it was 150 gross a week, because for us, it was just being tested. I was the first one to actually go into the paid role, just to actually do it was super exciting. It went from 5 people in the morning. You know, timing for me, life-wise, you know, if I'd arguably been there 2 years earlier or later, it wouldn't have been me. But I was lucky that it was me. So my thing was that I always had to fill the other hours with another role at the station, which is great. Like I ended up doing, you know, I did production. One stage I felt like I was sort of controlling a lot of the on-air sound of the station. Like I was doing breakfast and then stepping into production, which of course somewhere like that is like copywriting, producing and engineering. And like, okay, well I might as well voice this ad too.
Yeah.
But great for, I was going off topic now with this, but I'll go where I'm going. But, you know, great for becoming multi-skilled. And the dark arts of media production very quickly.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if you can go and do it yourself, I mean, the biggest... that sounds terrible, what I was going to say. The biggest roadblock to... What I was going to say was the biggest roadblock to getting things done is often other people. And if it's like, if you've got this idea to go and do something and you've got to wait for, you know, someone else to edit it or this to become available, then it just, you know, it's, oh God, are we all on the same team here or not? Yeah. So to be able to, you know, I'd filled in for production as well, so I'd had a very basic understanding of Pro Tools and I could cut a feature together. Yeah. And so, it was just, you know, having that skill to be able to go and find some talent and interview it and cut it down.
Sounds very similar. And then like sort of self-taught audio production. I think the guy that did it before me showed me how to make a squeaky voice by slowing down the tape and said that that's broken and then said, all right, I'll leave you to it.
Yeah.
And, you know, what do they say? Baptism by fire? Is that the expression? It was like just got in there and said, well, I need to get these ads out. They're coming in. I need to figure out how to make them.
And this was all around the time when I was learning this was kind of... Same thing with on air actually was when we're just going from
I know you're about to say same thing. I was going from tape to digital.
Yeah. So you know when you're cutting a bed together for an ad, then it would be you'd have the 8-track and you would have a bit of the you'd have the audio on 2 tracks and then you would have the new audio coming in on the other 2 tracks and you would roll record and you would have your finger on the CD player and you have to press it at the right time just so that it came in on the beat and it was like you got pretty good at it.
Oh, totally. You know, and we had, you know, again, great student radio budget story. Our first going to digital was we had a demo version of Cool Edit, and so the traditional radio ad's 30 seconds. The demo version of Cool Edit would go to, I think, 29 from memory. So if I wanted to do something, if I wanted to do something without the license on the digital side, I had to make my ads under. Now, imagine that for B. Your ads were 4 minutes long. It's impossible.
We never really stuck to 30 seconds.
No, never. We didn't really either.
Yeah, the only time we'd ever do that is if the client was a bit whack and, you know, it was like...
You're paying for these seconds.
An ad that we possibly didn't want to, that we sort of were going to create begrudgingly. We'd stick to it then, but for the rest of it, it was just... Wherever the script takes you, man. Yeah,
that's right. You know, some of the cannabis-induced visions I've heard for advertisements, fantastic.
Yeah.
So you spent about 2.5, 3 years doing that. Was it that you seem like someone who sort of moves on? You're sort of a new project guy. Was it a bit of that, a bit of moving over to let someone else do it? I moved over, and then the next person did it 10 years. It was because, for my experience down there, it was that transition from we are student radio, a breeding ground, to like a kind of a business thing. But I've gone off track a little there with you. Yeah, why did you move on? Just time to try something new?
Well, it was a mixture of a few things which all kind of led me to make the call. I tend to think that you want to leave any job before other people want you to.
Yeah.
And it's hard, you know, in broadcasting, probably a harder. I guess in sport, it's kind of easier to work out because you achieve something like you win this or you break this record or whatever. Whereas in broadcasting, you don't really have those milestones. You just have to kind of put your finger in the air and go, oh, now kind of feels right.
That's interesting you say, because those both have a public, which is an interesting part of those jobs. So you've got those people kind of vetting you as well.
Yeah, and I learned to have a pretty thick skin pretty early on, and there were, it wasn't, I had a handful of people whose opinion I respected, and those they were my kind of weather vanes. So what they thought of things was, I could isolate what they thought from what the general public thought, or what the angry texter or the angry phone caller, thought.
Yeah.
So there was a part of that, and partly I was a little bit disillusioned with the station at the time. There's a couple of promotions that happened which I thought weren't really us, you know, and I kind of, and it's kind of one.
You want to elaborate a little, like taking on clients you didn't think fit the.
Oh, not so much that. I don't know how much of it was how much of it kind of went into my decision. There was one particular promotion that I sort of remember where it was I felt that the competition, the way people entered this competition was a little bit commercial radio.
Yeah.
It was a little bit kind of like, it was the first idea, like you're sitting around having some ideas, and the first idea is a crap one, and no one had sort of bothered to trying to come up with a better one, which I thought we should have done. And I'm probably putting way more pressure, attributing that particular competition with way more of my decision making than I actually had at the time. But that's the kind of one I had in my mind, and so just a little bit disillusioned. And that's probably it. Yeah, partly that, partly wanting to move on before I became shit.
Nearly 3 years of being, on form for the public that early is also quite tiring.
Yeah.
What time are you starting? 6:30, 7, 6?
6 o'clock show started, so I was up at 4:30.
Yeah.
And I was in my early 20s, so I was going to bed late and going
Brother,
out.
you're preaching to the choir.
And, so
yeah.
like it's...
I couldn't even go out as often as I used to back then, let alone go and do a show in the morning as well now. Friday night, Graham Norton, I'm up, birds are tweeting, I love it.
It's amazing. Like some of those 2 hour sleep hangover shows can actually be incredible.
They can, but then you're almost out of body. I don't know about you, and then you reflect on them later on. Horrible sweats and
but it's such a risk. It's such a risk. Though.
How many people I could talk to about this? Yeah,
like I would never say it's a good idea to do it.
No.
Because 9 times out of 10 it would be a disaster.
I was 21,
but that one time that it worked, it was like, oh, that's
amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah. And sometimes the really sleep, eat really well, prepare. They're really flat till about 9 o'clock, and then you just let them ride out.
Yeah, it really was. Because you thought about it a lot. It wasn't that you were doing a show once a week. You're doing it every day, and it was 4 hours long.
Yeah,
that's a lot of hours in a week. That's as much. That's how many as many hours as some people sleep in a week. And so you kind of got quite good at analysing it and thinking about what did and didn't work. And
some mornings, if it's touch and go, you just get in there just a minute or two after that first hour, just get that mic on and assure everyone that you're alive and you're there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even if you're not going to talk for the next 15 minutes.
Yes. Yeah. That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we've got some food prep to do and okay. And then where did you go from there to the UK?
No, before that I went to TVNZ.
Of course.
And worked for the news department doing entertainment reporting for about 3 years.
That's interesting, because that's really taking you, especially at the time compared to now, to a very big audience, which is pretty much all of New Zealand watching those shows.
Yeah.
Because you worked on things like Close Up and stuff, didn't you? Our 7pm kind of current affairs slot.
In the second half of my time there, but the first half it was just the late news, so it was... it was called Tonight, 10:30 at night, and
that's a fun slot to go into post student radio because, well, at least I grew up remembering that slot being a little bit anarchic compared to the rest of TV.
Oh, totally! It was the Dylan Tate slot, and then it was the Nightline slot. And TV3, they were. I think TV3 with Nightline were almost trying to channel Dylan Tate.
Yeah,
his kind of late night crazy. Dutch Tilt.
And there was that redhead woman who kind of kicked it all off in the 90s. Oh, I can't remember.
Oh, yes, I know who you mean.
Yeah, and so you were the entertainment reporter. Fun.
Oh, yeah, it was good fun. I was given pretty... I mean, I was really lucky, actually. Like, it wasn't a job that was being advertised, but when I left BFM, I had nothing to go to, and Bill Ralston was head of news at the time, and I'd been trying to get him on as a guest the whole time I was there. Yeah. And he finally said, "Okay, what's your last day? I'll come in on that day." And just off air after the interview, he was asking what my plans were, and I said nothing, and he said, "Let's have lunch on Monday."
Oh, that's awesome! He spotted something. That's so cool.
And because I was, he kind of took me under his wing. Yeah, I kind of got away with stuff, and I really like.
I don't know him from Adam, but I really like what he's done over the years on TV and so on. Another person I remember being kind of quite different to what had gone on New Zealand TV for years, and those kind of TV3. He was just a bit different to what we've grown up with,
Yeah. So it was great. There were budgets, and if I wanted to chase a story, I had a company credit card, and I could book the flights, and I could go and book a cameraman and make it happen. It was awesome.
And what did you learn in the it's a very, very famous slot. A lot of places, well, at least Australia and New Zealand, from what I know, the kind of soft current affairs 7 p.m. slot. Like, what did you learn there? It's interesting. It's just an interesting thing to be involved with.
Storytelling, really. Yeah. Just being the ability to tell a story in a short period of time. Yeah. I think with the late news, the tape items were, I don't know, like some of them would be as short as 2 minutes. Yeah. But most of them wouldn't be any longer than about 3.5, maybe 4 minutes if it was, if it was a real slow news day and they would give you an extra minute or something like that. So you had to get really good at
strong angle, beginning, middle, end.
End. Yeah, it's a similar. Yeah, totally. And that's kind of where I learnt the power of transcribing interviews, of having all the words written down in front of you, and then really isolating.
Go through the highlighter.
If you're sitting there watching the tape, you kind of it's easier to kind of get muddled. Like when everything's written down on paper in front of you, all laid out, you can really go, oh, that's the story there, and then I'll put that there. And paper editing
sounds very similar to like when I've done. This is sort of the same as the uni research process, sort of seeing keywords, key themes, easy to do, and it's interesting. Yeah, so and then
at close up, then it was you had more time, so it would be maybe 5-6 minutes, maybe 7 minutes, and that just felt like a really long period of time. Like if you watch a
the shorter ones were. I thought you meant close up. What were the shorter ones on?
The late news.
The late news, yes, yes. And then, so with Close Up, it is fair to say, as I say, it's more so than the last few years. Those shows can capture a lot of New Zealand's sort of attention and spirit and what's being talked about and so on. Any stories you did that you sort of that stick out particularly for? I know this is a hackneyed question, but interests me. The story that New Zealand all talked about for the week following or whatever.
Well, the thing is, because I had this effectively protection from the Don, this employment via bill, I kind of I guess my point is, if I'd applied to have a job on Close Up as a reporter, I would have been expected to have covered stories that I was told to do that were just on the list of stories to cover that day. Whereas because I'd come from this sort of entertainment background and they weren't quite sure what I was doing, but they kind of liked it, and some people did.
Oh, you were the quirky story guy.
I was so
why not?
So the stories that I were doing really weren't the stories that the country were talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, they were profiles on filmmakers and musicians and bands and live crosses from events and those kinds of things. I think the most political I ever got was was a story about NZN's Phase 5 funding program, which they weren't very happy about the next day. Actually, no, there was an actual political one I did. There was when Rodney Hyde was going for Epsom, and I spent a day with him on the campaign trail, like accompanying him as he shook hands and stuff, and I kind of took the piss out of him a bit. So people talked about that one, yeah.
Oh, cool. You just reminded me of something, even though it wasn't a political move by any means. Something about that just sparked this. I forgot about the damn song, because you've got this like, your discography is one song, and it's like really well known. And did you write it when you were a teenager? We'd go move back a bit now.
Here's the thing. It wasn't a song. It wasn't written as a song. It was Freak the Sheep as a music show.
I think it's a song.
Well, I mean, it became a song, but it was
because I played that song on my
show. No, I didn't. I didn't sit down to write a song. There was it was Friday night drinks, and we were recording a new promo for Freak the Sheep, which is the NZ music show, and the scenario was a Joel Toback does the voiceover, New Zealand bands making it in those big American recording studios, and there's a scenario going back and forth about how the producer wants this big Aerosmith sound, and then the payoff is that they go 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's the most, rubbish sounding tinny parochial
4-track Kiwi demo
that you've ever heard.
Yeah.
So the idea was to make it sound as bad as possible.
Yeah.
And so we just, obviously we needed some lyrics for it. So we just said, "What's wrong with Huntley?" And that was, that was just because Huntley was that was the first town that kind of popped into my head.
Yeah.
And so it was a promo for a few months, and people.
So you wrote the lyrics that evening.
Well, the promo had been on air for a little while, and then people had started singing the line from the promo. Like I remember Marcus kept singing "What's wrong with Huntley?" like on the breakfast bus one particular morning.
Yeah.
And then
I remember business is booming, the power stations looming,
trucks come through zooming, and so it was a Friday night. We were having drinks, and I think it was probably Graham had said, "Let's turn this into a song. Let's record." Let's make the full version because people want to hear the full version. So that's when I got on.
You know what?
Was it on the internet, or I think I may have called the council up and asked them like some facts and figures about Huntley, and then just put them into lyrics.
Thank you.
We recorded the song on Friday night, and Graham played it on breakfast the Monday morning, and then the woman Christine from Virgin Records called him up and said, "We'd like to put this out as a single." And so
you actually sold some copies of that.
Yeah.
Did you see any money from that release?
No.
Why does that always happen?
Well, yeah. I mean, the label would have paid for the creation of the singles,
the one lunch you had with them. So what I really like about it now is world of internet. It doesn't exist. It's not out there. It's not on the internet.
There was. Do you remember the site Amplifier?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was on Amplifier.
Chris's site.
Yeah.
So good luck finding that modern world. It's a moment in time. I think it's good.
You can now because every once in a while someone would hit me up and say, "Have you got a copy of it?" And I think I ended up giving away all the singles that I had. I don't physically have it anymore.
Okay,
but
we all keep one for you.
Well, I thought that I had, then I think maybe I didn't. So I think I'd given away the last one, thinking I had more. But
into that never-ending box of singles under the parents' house.
Yeah.
Oh shit, it's empty.
And then it was also a hidden track on a BFM compilation called Louder.
Okay.
After the Princess of Poetry, and there was like 2 minutes of silence, and then hidden tracks were very big in the day.
They were.
And so I think I just ripped it from that. So I actually do have a wave of it, and I just got sick of people asking where they could get it. So I made a public Google Drive link, and I tweeted it out a few months ago. Last time someone asked, so.
You heard it here, folks. And while we're in that era, before we move forward in time again, a similar nugget of the era. Lots and lots of people for ages were after Damn Native's KDRU album, which I freaking love. That is now up online as waves on their site. So if you want copy of that. Then you are at Close Up, and then I think after that stint on TV, you do your proverbial big OE.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I moved to the UK.
So it was just that time to go and live in London like we do.
Yeah, I had a passport courtesy of my father, who was born in Glasgow.
Woo!
And it just sort of seemed... Yeah, it's funny because I never thought that I wanted to go overseas prior to that. But I guess, I don't know, there's something within you at that age, you feel the need to go and have a bash. And
it's very hard to talk to a few people about it. It's come up once when I was chatting to Aroha. It's like that sort of when you build something in New Zealand, it's so uniquely New Zealand, media wise and stuff. If you want to keep doing that stuff somewhere like there, it's very, very rude, quite a rude awakening, can't it? It's very different.
Oh, totally. Yeah, you just there is nothing.
Did you have expectations, or were you aware of that before you went? Like
no,
I
didn't have expectations. I expected it to be probably hard but fun when I was over there probably for the first year there was a lot of working in cafes. Excuse me, sorry, I'm not that well.
That's right. I now I'm older, it's terrible to sort of these realizations of critiquing yourself. For me, I had a poor attitude based on what I'd done here, and I should have just got stuck in and done some grafting as soon as I got there. It did me no favours. So to you did some cafe work.
Yeah, but then the last year and a bit that I was there, I'd ended up working with some friends on a music show. They had moved over a few years prior and were working with this guy called Toby, Toby was kind of the British equivalent of Nick D, and that he was this young guy who was really into music, talked very fast, very passionate, started a music blog when he was 14 called Rock Feedback, which had become quite...
Are you right for water and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good, yep.
Which had become quite a thing.
Yep.
And then that became a record label, and then... So he was in a position where he was, still a teenager really, and he signed Foals because his label, him and his business partner, Tim, were kind of bankrolled by Warner.
Yeah.
So their deal was that they could sign X amount of bands per year, and Warner, and they had kind of creative control, and Warner would be the backers. And then he started doing the show called Rock Feedback TV, which was... originally on MTV2, I think we had a season on MTV, on Channel 4 rather, late at night, and it was just really, really very basic. So we had some HTV camcorders, and we'd spend a couple of days at a festival, and then cut it into a 20-minute show.
Cool.
And it was excellent fun. That's when I taught myself how to edit video. And to delivery specs for a network, so it was a real crash course and all that kind of stuff.
And how long were you away?
3 years.
Okay, that's a spell.
Came back 2008.
That's a spell. I mean, it's not. Yeah, it's 3 years. It's 3 years. You came back. Was it a bit of readjusting after that time, sort of figuring out?
Well, it's funny.
What's Auckland doing? What are you doing?
What you were saying before about going over there. I had thought that coming home was going to be much easier.
Yeah.
It was like, I'll just pick up where I left off, Whereas it was actually as hard to kind of get my foot in the door at home as it was moving to the UK.
What year are we in roughly? You're going to come back about
2008.
2008, yeah.
So yeah, it was ages before I managed to get any regular work back in.
Oh really?
Yeah, totally.
Did you get a bit sort of down on it for the period there?
Well, we'd moved back with a 6-month-old.
Oh, okay.
So who knows what I was thinking? Your mind is it's in kind of survival mode.
Pretty common that being from New Zealand that I've heard that story many times.
Yeah.
Bringing up a kid in London is very different to going home and established and so on. So boy or girl, he or she must be 10 now, 9 or 10.
He is. Yeah, Finley's 10. Yeah.
Finley's 10. Crazy. How's that?
Awesome. He made on the holidays last week, the week before, he made his first video in this little filmmaking course thing with a whole bunch of his mates, and made this little 5-minute video. It was great.
Oh, they're so lucky. The idea that's like so beyond my reach of what I would have thought I could do at 9 or 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's cool. He's very cool.
You come back and so you sort of you find the employment landscape difficult, and what do you eventually fall on into? I think you're the Herald.
No, one step before that was back at TVNZ. They needed a reporter to... One second.
Here he goes.
Wow. I think it's out now. They needed a reporter to cover maternity cover for someone. Mm-hmm. So it was like a 12-month contract on 2020, which was a current affairs show. Yeah. Sort of more of a... I mean, it was a...
We know 2020. I don't really... When I was looking at that, I was like, I don't really know the New Zealand end of it. I know that I think Miriaka, or whoever it is, Miriaka Kama or someone hosts it. I didn't really know it had New Zealand
stories. So, I mean, if my memory serves me well, it was the overseas format, but it was anchored by Miriama, and there would be one or two local stories, and then there'd be an international story from the pool. And again, I was able to do, the stuff that I'd always sort of done with longer format. In those kinds of shows, you've got even more time, you've got like 13, 14 minutes,
But I don't imagine 2020 having like sort of slightly offbeat entertainment content.
It wasn't that it was offbeat. It was probably just interviewing more well-known musicians rather than the bands that I was into. Yeah.
But that's pretty... So you got to basically interview some stars, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think so. I can't really remember any of them, though. No. But then there were also some just, regular sorts of stories as well, cultural groups down the line. And
but it got you back on pedalling on the bike in New Zealand. Yeah.
And then they extended it. I think they extended it a little bit, another 6 months or something like that. So I was there for a little while, and it was when that came to an end, which was when I went to the Herald.
And you were digital entertainment sort of director or producer or something?
I don't really know what I was. My job...
But you were trying to help them... The way I'm reading between the lines, unless I'm wrong, you were one perhaps of a few people trying to get them a bit more into the modern world.
Yeah, well, my boss who hired me, Jeremy, was sort of the editor-in-chief of online. Yeah. So there was an online editor and there was the paper editor. And he was definitely pretty embracing of new content and technology, and was a bit of a music fan himself. So while my job was very much curating the website and the entertainment section, when I started, I noticed that there was a set of cameras and a little studio, and I was kind of just, I was picking them up and going, I might just go and do a little bit of this. And that eventually kind of just became my job full-time, just doing the video side.
And then you ended up putting on full-scale rock and roll shows.
Yeah.
The Shehard footage is amazing, bro. Well done. I'm sure the other footage is amazing too. That's the one I've watched all the way through, though. Yeah, and that's a great piece of work.
And there's 4 songs that I haven't edited yet from that, because at the time they were just playing that album through Five Eye beginning to end. But because the occasion of that was also the last
moments in history,
the last night at York Street.
Quickly, everyone, York Street Studios, obviously seminal New Zealand studios. Shehard, the first band to record there with Jazz Coleman. Then all these years later, they record their last album there with Jazz Coleman, who they'd fallen out with and got back with in the interim. Really interesting story.
Yeah, and. So we got them in to do that. Was there a point to what I was saying there?
No, I probably ran you off your road of your point. The other thing was the interview footage is great with you as well, chatting to them.
Oh yeah, well we had all these cameras. I think we had like 7 or 8 cameras in for the performance, and so we thought, well, let's use all of them for the interview as well. So it's a very well covered interview.
No, it is.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, because of the sense of occasion. After playing Five Eye, they did this encore. And they played 3 songs from, I think, from Churn. So they weren't part of the promotion at the time, but they're sitting there waiting for me to edit them.
Yeah, they're such a great... I mean, they are... I've never, ever seen them do a bad show.
And that was a pretty special. I mean,
It was.
there were like 50 people in the audience, just sort of hanging around. We shot it in the round.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah,
that,
it was
folks,
awesome.
is available online, and it's I don't know my formats and stuff, but it looks like HD to me. It's good quality.
Oh yeah,
It's up on the. I found it on the Houraki website or somewhere like that, I think. So
yeah, it's well, eventually I'm kind of gonna go through. I've recorded. I should say I've kept all of the individual files from all of the Sunday session, so I can go back and do a bit of a touch-up edit. So I'm going to go back and do that, because a lot of them have just sort of fallen off the Herald YouTube channel and the Herald site now. They just kind of went so far down.
I've found that, or
list
there's I think I've gone to a couple of things where it's sort of claimed it's going to be there. All the words are, but the media's missing.
Yeah.
So I don't know how Hauraki ended up with the Shihad one on their site, but I'm pretty sure that's where I found it.
Well, it was, and that was because I guess they didn't have as much content for it to fall away, but also
those are the same company as well.
The same company, yeah. So they were in the early days of cross promoting between their brands, and so that was a good fit for them.
So some guests, shows go all different ways. I haven't sort of talked a lot about your personal life, but around that time you lost your brother, which is tragic.
Yeah, it was around that time. Actually, it was about 4 or 5 years ago. That was just as I was leaving, applying for BFM and just leaving the Herald. Yeah. Actually, I've just got to blow my nose. 1 sec.
That's
Is that
right. Yeah, sure. So I will fill the nose blowing section of the show by. Oh goodness, these mics are condenser mics. Pick everything up. Excellent. That footage is worth watching. It's just Google Sunday sessions. Shihad is probably enough. And
so that's interesting. You chose not to just pause it. You just is that your rule?
Well, I mean, if you'd kind of, I don't know, if you'd become incontinent or something, I probably would have.
Sorry, back now.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's a bit of it going around, incontinence. No, clogging up and stuff between the seasons. So you apply for B. Now, it's a funny one because I ended up back in the student radio fold when I came back to New Zealand because basically Mikey couldn't turn up at 6 a.m. So I was on this weird Band-Aid show, but it was interesting going back into that environment as a much older person. How was it sort of going back to B? You've gone from being the youngest to one of the oldest.
Oh, the oldest on staff.
Yeah,
for sure. It was a little nerve-wracking.
Morale was quite low when you went back in, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It was a little odd going back, even just physically being in that environment again, where I'd spent so many years. I remember before I started, it was announced that I was doing it, and before I'd actually kind of come in, because I think I had a month's notice to give, and I'd come up for a bit of a induction, for want of a better term. So I just had a bit of a walk around the station and learnt what all the systems were, and with Rick, the technical director, just showing me where all the servers were and how next gen, work, all these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And it was so before I kind of came back, I'd had these, I'd popped up from time to time, and so that kind of weirdness of walking in to a whole bunch of people I didn't know on the first day wasn't quite so bad.
Yeah.
And there was probably a small handful of people there who I'd not, if not known from my previous time there, had met through friends or were kind of in the wider sort of whānau.
Yeah.
It was odd, but I think there was a real hunger for some light, and
that's great. That's a very eloquent way of putting it.
And so it didn't take long to kind of get straight into it, really.
Yeah. And did you see it and go, I'm going to do that? Or did someone go, Hugh, You should do that.
Do you mean before
The
I
job,
apply?
yeah, the job. Yeah, I'm interested.
I remember hearing on Twitter that that the job was about to come up, and at the time I didn't think that I don't even think that I thought that I wouldn't go for it. It just didn't, a management job like that just didn't even feel within the realms of my sort of skill set anyway.
Yeah.
So it was almost like it was a moot point. But at some point, I did think about it, and again, I'd been at the Herald for a little over 5 years, so that was quite long for me.
Yeah,
and I guess at the time, so I would have been in my mid-30s, and I'm probably starting to think, okay, what am I going to do with this next half of my life?
you must be 40 now.
Yeah. And
Welcome.
Thank you. And so I started thinking about it more seriously, and I gave the chair of the board a call and talked about it, and I could kind of tell from what he had said.
Is that Hockard?
No, he wasn't there anymore.
Yeah.
No, he'd gone the previous year, I think. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
Simon Telfer was his name.
Yep.
And I think maybe from the wording of the way the job ad was, I could just sort of sense that there was, I don't know, I kind of read it and thought, I could do that. And so
Nothing like local knowledge, man. Long-term historical local knowledge. Yeah.
And I think, the place at the time, I think the board probably recognised that a little bit of what had been prevalent at the station previously was probably a good thing. And I just, I guess what I decided, what I decided would be the best things to concentrate on, won the board over and got the job.
Well done. When I did that weird Band-Aid slot for Mikey, where they actually sort of told me afterwards what I kind of already knew, that they wanted someone to give him a run for his money, which I didn't do because how can you? It's Mikey's slot, it's Mikey's city, and I approached it more like a sort of a warm-up comedian for the main act.
Right.
But when I was up there for that period in general, which I think was 2008 or 9, I mean, morale felt quite low then, and then it went through a period with the manager before you. So it's been really cool watching. I've watched, mate. I've read. It's been great seeing some of the things that you did.
Thank you.
It's a complex beast. The volunteer paid mix with everyone super passionate about whatever it is, be it music or news reporting or it's a really. People, I don't think some people understand. It's a as I say, the only word I can think of again is it's a complex environment, let alone managing it, and making everyone feel valued.
Well, there's depending on what era you're talking about, there's around 14, 15 staff, and then there's about 6 or 7 people on the board. Then there's the AUSA, who are your shareholder. Then there is about 50 or 60 regular volunteers who would be there, at least once or twice a week. And then there's probably another 80 to 90 kind of, I wouldn't say hangers-on, but just part of the, volunteers who might not necessarily have a show at the time, but who might be in between shows or kind of left but never really left, and they might kind of come back.
Well, they did. They did a show 18 years ago, and they've still got an opinion. That needs counting. Yeah.
So there's a lot of people to manage, and so the approach was very much just, and I just had to, when there's that many people, you can't fudge it. You can't kind of lie. You've just got to be honest with people about the situation that you're in and what your intentions are and what your values are, and hope that it resonates with them, and at the same time be very aware that you don't want to be that old guy coming back and going, this is how we used to do it, this is what it's going to be, you
bring back the bus in the mornings.
You have to do it from you have to do it from a kind of more inspirational way rather than this is
mentoring and sort of growing what
Yeah.
they want to do. I mean, I was teaching at Mains just for one class for a semester, and I met a guy Hunter, who you probably know, Hunter Keane, right? So that was. Bro, that's one example of all the people you've talked about. I just found when I found out he was at BFM, I just found it fascinating talking to him about what that was for him as a 17 or 18-year-old or whatever he was in 2017 when I'm a dinosaur. It was interesting.
Yeah,
just different takes on the same place, but a completely different generation.
Yeah.
If you want to be a student radio whisperer, Hugh, there's currently a job going for a station manager in Wellington. Maybe go down and...
Oh, so is that what they're doing? They're getting a manager? Because they went to a panel for a while, didn't they?
Yeah. No, they're getting someone in. It's properly advertised and everything.
Right.
So, another, obviously, a topic that would come up a lot. He's one of our, I think, most gifted broadcasters ever, but he comes with sort of well-known, there's some problematic things mainly around time management. Who am I going to talk about? No. And it's an oft-told story if you follow the station and so on that, the station was, the way I've heard it, about to financially collapse unless it got support. And there were sponsors and so on willing to back Mikey coming on, and he has. It must have been an interesting experience in itself. How did you get him to turn up on time, which he seems to be doing now?
I don't know how true that is.
Okay.
It's kind of, me and Mikey's history is quite interesting.
Yeah.
So, back in the night, there is a natural thing where you're both on air in the same position, or one person's kind of keen to take that position over, where it can be a little bit strange, and and we it's no secret that I wanted to do breakfast, and and I would look at him turning up whenever and think, oh, it's so frustrating, I'd be there on time, and
so frustrating.
But at the same time, we had also been mates as well, and before
yes,
that,
then there's his charisma.
we'd go and, we'd hang out and go swimming on Cheltenham Beach, and so we kind of had this relationship which was sometimes good and sometimes a bit bad, and so when I had originally called him to come back, well, I said, can we have a meeting? Can I take you out to lunch? And he didn't know what it was about, and so when I asked him, just the fact that I had, I think our most recent history had probably been a little bit awkward.
Yep.
Just because there'd been stories about the station in the past where we'd sort of said things that were, which if the other person had read, they probably would have been a little bit offended.
Yeah.
So when I asked
There'd been
him,
some professional rivalry there. Yep.
yeah, totally, and
When unprofessional rivalry.
and when he, so just by way, as he told me later, just by way of me asking him, he was just really. Oh, in fact, even before that, there was an NZ on Air thing that we were at one night. He just came up to me out of the blue and said, "I'm just really impressed that you've gone back to try and
cool. Yeah,
blah 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 blah. So good on you, kind of thing." So there was a bit of goodwill there. So when I called him, he had said later that he just felt quite, I don't know if touched or honoured or whatever, just the fact that given everything that we'd been through, that I had come back to him thinking that he was going to be the solution.
Yeah.
So
in
in a kind of in a roundabout way, I think he wanted to prove that confidence was not misplaced. So he tried his best to be there on time.
And that is, as it slipped from 1:15 to 1/2 to quarter to the next hour to...
I don't know now. I don't know. When you first leave somewhere, you probably don't, I don't listen as much because, it's just an odd thing, you're trying to distance yourself from...
That's right, yeah, that's right, and he's a broadcasting genius. But yeah, when I'd sit there and it would stretch through till sometimes So I was doing the show as officially. I was doing 6 till 7. Then it became officially 6 till 7:30. When I was sitting there after 8:30 in the morning, putting my own name out on the air, but the producer of the breakfast show had sort of been tuned up to never give me content. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. It took me a while to get over that. So I've had him in here since. We had a laugh. At the end, he said of his own accord, the very last line of the podcast is, "And on time, may I add?" Because he actually got here. I wasn't even expecting that. But so bless him. So probably the 5th stint on breakfast, he's still there. I felt for you on the second day when he wasn't there, but apparently got sick.
That was
Thailand.
That was
unfortunate.
Like, I just couldn't believe it. Like
honestly, bro, I don't even know you then. I was like, oh man, Hugh.
It was. But I mean, he was legitimately, in a very physical, like it was coming out every. Yeah. Well,
it does that.
He'd been overseas and got something.
Now, the remnants of the Herald online, nothing we talked about in the 90s really exists online, but I find an article from 2000, Hugh. Did you ever follow through on that pilot dream? You're flying?
Yep. I learnt to fly around 99, I think it was.
So cool.
I just got I'd always been obsessed by planes, and I wanted to fly one, so I got a student loan and went out to Ardmore and learnt to fly. But then I ran out of money because
that's
sure
actually one of the more responsible uses of that old system where you'd call up at 18 and go, "Hey, can I have 20 grand in my account tomorrow, please?" That I've heard.
Well, in my case, I think it was about 50 grand.
Well, I often think, what if a bunch of us had got together and bought property or started a business or... Well, I did know someone who bought a huge rubbish bag of weed. That was kind of a business.
But didn't the money have to go to the... Oh, I can't remember.
You just got flying lessons with it, so it didn't have to go anywhere.
Well,
The bar at Vic Uni used to have, like, on their chalkboard, basically it's student loan day, just come and spend it all.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, where I learnt to fly was a accredited NZQA place, so it was a legit course I was doing.
Oh, sorry, I cut you off. Of course it was. You weren't. You've already said you weren't at uni. Hey, now we're nearly there. What are you doing now, bro? Have you started? I kind of got the vibe. Maybe you started a business with your partner, or
yeah. So in all these jobs that I've done previously, there would be a lot of video of regular events and live streaming of things and. After a while you think, I could be doing that for us and not for, someone else. Because often those relationships weren't so much with the organisation, they were relationships that I had with people, so they'd follow me around wherever I happened to be. And, when you're sort of thinking, getting to the end of 3 years and thinking, okay, I'm thinking about moving on now, what are my options? That becomes an obvious sort of thing to try and expand on. So we've been doing that, and the rest of the time managing the Hollywood in Avondale.
Oh, is that you doing that? So you know Dave from Hallertau, who sends me delicious beers for this podcast.
I've met Dave from Hallertau. What do you mean he sends you beers for this podcast? I haven't seen one.
It's 10 in the morning.
Yeah.
He suggested I do a podcast there. So it's you that's responsible for suddenly there's all sorts of interesting events. Giles Pedersen coming up?
It's not me responsible for it. It's Matthew Timpson who's responsible for buying it in 2015 and saving it from... Is that
a relation of Ant?
His brother.
Oh.
And him, he really saved it from... I mean, he really did save it. Like it was going to go to one of two other purchasers who would have both turned it into either apartments or bowled it for a car park.
Yeah.
So and he spent the last 2 or 3 years getting new systems, renovating, doing bits and pieces.
It's great. It's really working in Wellington. The one in Miramar, they've got the Roxy's great.
The Roxy. Oh yeah, we've got a bit of a sister relationship with the Roxy. Yeah. We sometimes kind of share the costs of bringing out guests and that kind of thing. So it's he can take the credit for that. I just but he's an ideas guy and a film film buff, whereas I kind of come in and have the Xero login and do the accounts and establish some systems and that kind of
Well,
stuff.
it's turned into one of those kind of this is your lifey ones, but it's been a pleasure. It's been 83 minutes. I think we can.
Fuck, really? Wow.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that was
I'm the guest whisperer.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you finally, Hugh.
Thank you very
okay,
much.
I'll have
You
this
too.
up in a jiffy.
New Zealand bands making it in those big American studios.
Okay, guys, that was really cool. We loved it in here, huh? Yeah. Maybe just one more time from the top. This time, like, the kids want a big Aerosmith sound, you know, like they were in here last week, a big, big sound. So let's try it one more time from the top. Okay, 3, 2, 1, burn!
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
What's wrong with Huntley? It's my home country. So much more grunty. Just ask my auntie. I went there New Year's and drank a few beers. Weren't many girls there. That was really cool, yeah. 2 sets of traffic lights. Population 7,000. Approximately just by a big river. It's got a big power station. Angus MacDonald's the mayor of the town. He's into coal mining. What's wrong with Huntley? It's my home country. It's got a statue of old Sir Matthew. Business is booming, tourism's looming, the power station's fuming, trucks come through zooming. What's wrong with Huntley? It's my home country. Huntley welcomes through industry. Why people aren't there, it's a mystery. Huntley, great during Christmas. Huntley, better for your business. Huntley, something you just can't miss. Huntley, it's never minus. Huntley, Huntley. What's wrong with Huntley? It's my home country. Just go there, just go down State Highway 1. That's how you get there. Don't go through the gym, don't go through anywhere else. Huntley's the place you gotta go. Big sign out.